Okay. I think we're gonna get started. If anyone's still wandering in, that's all good. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's nice to see all of you. Welcome to the Wisconsin Maritime Museum. My name is Caroline. I'm the programming coordinator here. I am so excited to be welcoming you all to this year's Think and Drink. Think and Drinks, for those who don't know, are a free monthly speaker series that happens on the first Thursday evening of every month. So this year, we're holding a year of free talks focused on both historical and modern great women of the Great Lakes and beyond, and telling their stories. And it's a topic I'm so excited to share with you guys about. I would like to thank our sponsor, the Wisconsin Humanities Council. The Wisconsin Humanities Council is one of the reasons that these talks can be free and available both in person and online. The Wisconsin Humanities Council strengthens our democracy through cultural programs that bring connections and understanding between people of all backgrounds and beliefs throughout the state. So thank you to them. I will apologize for anyone who got a little bit confused. I know that last month I said that the talk was going to be about spars and waves. There was some last minute changes. Spars and waves will still be talked about, but that's going to be in March. Instead, we have the wonderful Amy Meyer from Manitowoc County Historical Society, and she's going to be telling us about all of the cool women from Manitowoc. So I'll let Amy take it away.
Well, thank you, Caroline. And like Caroline had mentioned, my name is Amy. I've been with the Manitowoc County Historical Society for 17 years now. And when I began at the Historical Society, I started off as an intern, and I will be the first one to admit that I did not like history. Anyone? It's probably the wrong room to ask. Anyone else? Not like, all right, maybe I see a half of a hand. Okay, kind of, okay, couples. You can admit it's a safe space. So as I started in my role at the Historical Society, I learned, first of all, that history was indeed really cool, as I'm sure you all have known that for years. But there is local history that surrounds us that is well known, not so well known, and some things that were not well documented, not well shared, and those are the stories that I like to tell. So today we are going to take a very brief look at some remarkable women from Manitowoc County that have made a difference in our history books. So they might not have actually been in the books, but they gosh darn should have been. So as I'm going through this presentation today, I want you in your minds to channel your moms, your grandmas, your aunts, even you. I know there's a few guys in the audience, so thank you for coming today, but please also channel your moms, grandmas, any influential people in your lives. It's really about the everyday people who they might not be making the history books or the newspapers, but the women that you're going to hear of today, the women in our own lives are doing the exact same things, just more quietly. So let's get started with a historic Housewives of Manitowoc County. All right. Anyone ever heard of Eva Anderson? Oh, goodness. Oh, maybe. All right. So this is a woman that I love to share about. So first of all, she is actually represented at our Manitowoc County Historical Society, but in a very discreet way. If you've ever been to our McAllister House Welcome Center, you will walk into our exhibit room and see the gorgeous flag of Company A. Anyone see the flag before? All right, so that flag was donated by James Anderson, who we talk about so often, Civil War, Manitowoc County leader. This is his wife. And as the saying goes, behind every man is an incredible woman, right? So this is actually a newspaper clipping from the Manitowoc Herald. So probably doesn't give the most beautiful rendering of Eva Anderson. She's obviously older in this picture, but channel a younger version in your minds. So Eva actually has a pretty good history in her own right. So she was the only daughter of a circuit court judge in Grant County. She went to private schools, very well educated, actually a graduate from Lawrence University in Appleton. Any other graduates in the room? No? Oh. So she is a school teacher and marries Judge James Anderson, here of Manitowoc. She becomes almost like a leader here. She gets very involved. This is her adopted city. She doesn't know anyone, but she jumps in both feet, head on, full forward. But she quickly realizes that there isn't a lot of culture here in Manitowoc in 1873. So what does she decide to do? Any ideas? Just sit on the back burner? Definitely not. So Eva decides she's going to do something about it. There has to be culture. There has to be educated women here. She's going to find them. So in 1891, she decides to do just that. She starts on a hunt to find local women who are interested in reading literature, learning about culture, art. She finds 20 women here in Manitowoc. So remember, 1891. Just to remember, 20 women. She starts a group, and they start the Cleo Club. Anyone heard of that before? No? You'll hear a lot about it during my presentation today. It's a popular who's who of the city of Manitowoc. So she serves as president of the club for the first 15 years. And actually, the club has over 100 years of history behind it, once we kind of get more modern. But right here, Eva Anderson is the start of that club. So her success doesn't end right there. Of course, literacy is very important. What do you need for literacy to survive in a community? Books. Where do you house the books?
Library.
A library. All right, so not too far here down the road is this building right here, the Carnegie Library. So anyone remember going to this building? Oh, yay. So we have interior pictures of this, and I drool every time I see it. It is a gorgeous structure. So Eva Anderson is actually responsible for the Carnegie Library here in Manitowoc. She really is a strong proponent behind we need a place that people can go. We need a place where you can borrow books.
Where is it?
The Carnegie Library. Let me see the road.
Okay, then I want
We're getting to it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Ooh, can you find the address? I've got an address. Hold on. I'll get it for you. Okay. So as we kind of go along, of course, Eva is very interested in making sure books are accessible to people. She kind of becomes a pest to Carnegie. She writes letters. She sends postcards. She even tries to find the 6 degrees of separation to Carnegie here in Manitowoc. There's got to be someone that knows someone who knows someone who knows someone. And eventually, in 1900, the library precursor to this building, it opens. She finally gets her library, but not from Carnegie, from the Jones Library. It's too small. She's not happy. She's going to keep trying. So she keeps going. And finally, in December of 1902, she receives word from Carnegie's secretary that he is able to donate $25,000 to build a new library, which is this building right here. So the property was located on the northwest corner of North 8th and Chicago Streets, so just down the road. And the ground was broken for a new library in 1903. So you can imagine from a little tiny household-sized building where they first started the library to this with Andrew Carnegie and her prompting, begging, pleading. It paid off. She got it done. It served the city of Manitowoc here until 1966, when a new library was built down on Hamilton Street. So you can see a little bit different angle of it there. So this is in 1909, is this photo right here.
Why did they tear that one down?
Progress, right?
And there was one more between this one and that one. There was one other library. Hamilton Street.
Yeah.
Yep,
Lakeside Foods is there.
Lakeside Foods corporate office.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm. A little teaser, if I can make my own little teaser, we will be doing a program at the Historical Society about lost treasures of Manitowoc County, where this building will be featured. So check that out for a future date. All right. Linda, do you want to come on up here and correct me?
Oh, I won't.
Anything? All right. All right, so here we have two incredible leading ladies that you may not know what they've done or what they all accomplished, but you'll know the buildings that we're talking about. So Rosa Kellner and Anna Kellner are sisters, and they operated or were innkeepers at the Williams House Hotel. Does that ring a bell for anyone? It will, trust me. All right, so these two ladies, we've got Rosa on this side, Anna over on the other side. So Anna Kellner was born in 1827 in Bohemia, and she died here in Manitowoc in 1902. She was the wife of Samuel Williams, who had died in 1861, so kind of at the beginning of the Civil War. She was a widow that never remarried, but continued to call Manitowoc here her home. She built the Hotel Williams and made it flourish in the 1860s, and she operated herself for many years. And also the Williams block is named after her as well. So you've got the Williams house, you've got the Williams block, and that's all in due credit to Anna. Of course, she also really carried on a business legacy. So again, going back 1860s, it's very rare, first of all, for a woman to be operating such a standard hotel. This was the place when you were traveling here in Manitowoc, going in and out, the boats docking here, you're getting sailors staying there. You stayed at the Williams house. You wanted to stay at the Williams house. Everywhere else was almost like slumming it at this time. So again, Anna, I can only imagine, had very high standards. Cleanliness, hospitality, customer service. She's able to compete with businessmen in the city of Manitowoc and compete very well. So well that when she had passed away, the flags were flown at half-mast in the city of Manitowoc, at the Williams House, and all along the Williams block, as well as the Victoria Hotel. So that's an incredible businesswoman right there. Her sister, Anna, in a younger version right over here, she was born in 1841. So as a young woman in the 1860s, Anna had gone to Texas with her husband. Her husband was ill, and they hoped that the Texas weather would recuperate, help him feel better. It didn't, and he had passed away, but Rosa was left in charge of the Williams house with her brother that may or may not have been so dependable, correct? Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah.
All right. So as you can imagine, Rosa probably very much looked up to Anna, and of course had the same strict hospitality guidelines, wanting to make the Williams house the best that she can. But of course, she is running the Williams house almost at its heyday. So she is seeing the Civil War unfold in Manitowoc from its windows, from its doors, from its sidewalks. So she actually kept a journal, which I believe Linda still has in her possession.
Maybe some of the people that are on the Facebook site for Memories of History of Manitowoc, do you remember the posting of Rosa's journal? I call them Rosa groupies. Interesting. Because it's 500 pages on long legal paper. It's
Yeah.
extensive and written very well, even though she's a German immigrant. How she wrote so well, I don't know. But
Right.
beautiful.
Well, it's a great testament to not only her viewpoint, but that she was able to not only see it, but record it for future generations is incredible. And that's how we're able to know a lot about Rosa and almost the heyday of the Williams house at this time. So not only did her front row view offer her different scenic opportunities of the men actually going and marching to Union Park, seeing the story of the Civil War locally unfold, it also kind of gave her a little bit of an opportunity to voice her own story. So obviously at this time, young women were not able to join the Civil War effort or the Manitowoc County Guards, but she had wrote in her journal, "If I were only a boy tomorrow, with other brave men, I would enlist and let those Southern traitors see what Northern men can do." So Rosa's father, both of the girls' father, passed away in 1865, and Rosa went into a terrible depression. She got married and eventually lost 2 little twin daughters, and again, kind of spiraled down into depression. She loved writing and wrote in her journal, "I love to write. When I have a pen in hand, the black fluid near me, of course, paper and books scattered around me, I am at home in my element. I would love to write a book. Would I have had the opportunity? Have some, I would earn a name for myself that would probably outlive this frail body." So again, by telling her story, we're able to keep her alive. So in September of 1868, Rosa gives birth to a son, Joseph, but just a short time later, she would pass away. So in her mid-20s, Rosa would fade from history books. But again, as we know, we're keeping her and all these women still alive and strong through telling their story today. So there's those 2 ladies. And here is kind of the second Williams house. So Hotel Williams, this is a postcard, and it was located on the corner of South 8th and Franklin Streets. So the Williams house really began in about kind of this building, like the Kresge building intersection. Yep. I don't know Kresge, but that's what everyone talks about, right? Kresge building.
It's fun because we grew up here. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I love you can kind of see all the vehicles in front. So pretty much when we look at the history of this building, this large brick structure right here was constructed in 1867, and it had replaced a previous structure that was built in 1850. So it had been destroyed by fire in 66. So at the time that Rosa would have really been at the Williams house. So in 1868, the Manitowoc City Directory really gives you a nice ad for this building. It says, "The wants of the traveling public will receive a prompt attention, and no pains will be spared to give perfect satisfaction to all travelers." A large stable was also connected to the hotel. So obviously, as you know about hotels, stagecoaches, you need somewhere for the horses to rest and recoup. And this building was actually one of Manitowoc's oldest hotels until it was taken down in the 1920s. So another fabulous building that Manitowoc had.
The only thing that's left is an annex, the Fat Seagull.
Yeah.
Part of it's supposed to be kind of haunted
Mhm.
by baby girls. Maybe what it is haunted. So the Fat Seagull was part of it, as a billiard hall that they connected with like an annex, so they didn't have to walk out in the pool, but that Seagull still exists.
Yep.
But that's on the street, isn't it?
No, it would, right, yeah, so it would be, going on.
Walk down and then over.
Right, on Key Street.
Yeah, so where the Williams house was, they kind of continued on. And as Linda said, it was added on to, annexed. And so if you visit the Fat Seagull today, you can almost experience part of where the Williams house would have been as a passway through. And I have heard that there's some pieces of the original bar still floating around Manitowoc, supposedly, as well. So whether that's rumor or fact, it's still a really neat piece of history.
So, excuse me, so Kellner Street, was that kind of named after these women?
No, that would be named after maybe John, and, there's another Kellner that had, they had 2 establishments on that corner, but it would be Rose's cousin, or second cousin.
Yeah, Yes.
It's all in the street.
Yep. So Kellner Street would most likely be the same family who was very prominent in Manitowoc. Yeah. All right. So Sister Thomas Moore. Anyone? Not familiar quite yet? Yes? All right. So Sister is well known locally and in the state of Wisconsin as a teacher, author, and a public speaker. After graduating from high school in 1935 in Michigan, she worked at a grocery store. Her family was in great debt during the Great Depression, and she needed to work. She taught history and economics and pushed for public policy changes for more than 3 decades until she died in 2000 at Holy Family Convent. She was 82. She was known nationally as a champion for worker rights and in the women's farmers movement of the 1970s. She was an expert on economic and political pressures affecting family farms and farm women and farm wives. She said, "Being a nun helps me. The knowledge gives me respect, and the religious garb gives me trust." I don't know about you, but I see a sister, your respect level goes up automatically as well. She was very correct. So she had joined the Franciscan Sisters of Christian Charity in 1939. And as soon as she began there, she knew she had a purpose. She began to concentrate mostly on agricultural issues and, again, the farm families and the connections that we had. So what better place than rural Manitowoc County? You're talking about farm families all over. Were her people. So by 1969, she was gaining attention for her talks on why farmers should unite to harness the power that these farm families had together. And she called it Farmer Power. Any farmers in the room? No? Yay! She gave lectures in 46 states, in Canada, and she urged farmers all over Manitowoc County to play an active role in the food production policy and farm making policies and developing farm labor laws. She said, "Farmers and their associates in the industry have very little to say about the direction of farm policy, whether in the political or economic arenas." So that was in 1987 that she had said that. She finished with, "We can do it. We have power. We just need to work together." Today's special interests, such as animal rights, farm chemical opponents, environmental extremists, vegetarians, and nutritionists without much study behind them, have a great deal to say, but they aren't being heard. The producers know what is produced and in the manner in which it will be done. She actually talked with Barbara Walters. So you may or may not know Barbara Walters. I think most people have heard of the name. Again, another historic woman in her own right, just not from Manitowoc County. But she did have a conversation with Sister Thomas Moore. She also was invited by President George Bush to participate in the 1988 GOP convention to talk about agricultural issues. So talk about a woman who is spreading her wings far beyond Manitowoc County and taking that farmer power to a national level. Former Manitowoc Mayor Tony Dufek, he was a Democrat, and he had served with Sister, which he is quoted as saying, "She's a true card-carrying Republican, but I like her." He continues on, "We took several trips to Madison, back and forth, the two of us. We had some lively conversations. I can remember stories of her walking into lettuce fields in California to take on a fight for migrant workers' rights. She didn't like to see anyone exploited." She also was the feature, or yes, the icon, in a few political cartoons. So they didn't always make the best light of her, especially in her, as she called it, her nun garb. But again, her method and her philosophy got across. She also actually was featured in the Wall Street Journal. She made a little quote there, and also the National Farmers Union Herald and Canada's Alberta Unifarm newspaper. So she eventually goes on, takes this philosophy into a published book, The In Pursuit of Agri-Power. So there are still copies of this book, I know, at the Manitowoc Public Library. We also do have copies of this book at our Historical Society, if you're interested in giving it a quick read. But one of my favorite pieces of Sister is from Joanne Vogel, if anyone knows her, another more modern historic woman in her own right. But she knew Sister, and together they had worked a lot on the Wisconsin Women of Agriculture. So this was one of the first statewide organizations to really focus on the farm women, and that you don't need the man to necessarily own the farm, own the land. You could own your own farm if you wanted to, your own equipment, your own tractors. So giving power behind the woman who was working on the farm as well. She said, traditional farm organizations don't allow women to make decisions. We learned to use the power and talent we knew we had. People didn't always agree with what we say, but they respected us. There she is. Jessie Edgars. A few recognize the name. You might recognize Edgars more than anything. So Jessie is in the, I guess, top left-hand corner. You can kind of see her little face right there. So Jessie has quite a bit of background on her, even before she marries into the Edgars family. So Jessie Lee Madden Edgars, she is the great-granddaughter of Henry Dodge, who that name might be a little familiar for you. He was the first territorial governor of Wisconsin and a U.S. senator. So she has a little bit of politics behind her, maybe a little bit that she's learned or overheard at the dinner table over the years as well. So Jessie is born in Dodgeville in 1871 and graduates from the Platteville Normal School. So you can see Jessie's picture again there. So she is obviously a woman surrounded by men on this poster, which is, again, a really influential piece that we have in our collection. So when she marries into the Edgars family, she comes to Manitowoc County, and again, where's all the culture? Where's all the influence? She knew that she could be that here for our community. So she comes here, and about the year 1900, already she wants to make change. 1900, a woman trying to get on a ballot, not happening, right? You can't even vote on the ballot at this point. So she starts small. She becomes active in trying to get the suffrage society here in Manitowoc up, running, recruiting. That's her first step. She is a very obviously big proponent of passing the suffrage movement. And as soon as the suffrage amendment is passed in 1920, guess what? She's just skyrocketing. She's like, okay, we can vote. Sky's the limit. Let's just keep pushing that. So she decides, I'm not only going to vote, I'm going to run for a state office. So she runs for state assembly and is arguably one of the first women in the entire state of Wisconsin to run for a state office. So this is part of her campaign poster, campaign advertisement. Her leading slogan, or yes, platform, was, when a woman thinks, read. When a woman thinks, listen. True, right? I agree. The just women will want to vote for and support a woman who has worked for all. She trusts the future to a woman, and the woman has made present what it is today. For over 20 years, I have worked with my time, my money, and my sacrifice to raise myself and all women to equal rights. I hope I can earn your vote. So unfortunately, Jessie loses the election. Her political ambitions don't go any further at a state level at that point, but she continues her work on women's rights and also getting and encouraging women to get out and vote. So remember, at this time, there's groups of women that are excited about going to the polls, placing their vote. But again, there's almost a whole nother segment of women that was like, I never voted before. Doesn't make much difference to me. She's working on those women. She's trying to get them to the polling place, getting them to vote. And that is Jessie Edgars. All right, Diantha Hamilton. So obviously, Hamilton name, everyone should be knowing that. Hamilton is definitely a name that we are very familiar with locally. But Diantha, not so much. So Diantha has, almost a story of tragedy, triumph, and a little bit of legacy all mixed into her tale. So Diantha is actually the daughter of Hezekiah Huntington Smith, Deacon Smith, who is the founder of Two Rivers. So again, she's got a little bit of background in her own right as well, being the daughter of the founder of an entire city. So she is born in 1830 and eventually, obviously, travels to Manitowoc County. And what does she do? She gets married into the Hamilton family. So that gives her a little bit extra prestige work. Before that, she's actually an educator and a very well-known educator in the community. She, in some materials, is credited with opening the first school in Two Rivers in 1845. It was a private school, 18 students, and classes were at first held in her home until she championed them to build a new frame building between River and 15th Streets in Two Rivers. So, of course, she's married, stops teaching. Her husband is killed during the Civil War. So she is a single mom, widowed, 2 young sons. Where do you even start? She's not getting any help from the government at this time. She is left without any family in Two Rivers besides the Hamilton core family. Her sons later go on to found the Hamilton Manufacturing Company. So she's not quiet during this entire time. She stays involved. She's like that hovering mom, right? That's what I almost envision. Hey, who are you making a contract with? Should you be signing that? That's what I envision her. I don't know about that, but that's how I picture Diantha. So through her efforts, obviously Hamilton business becomes very well known. The printing company takes off. Wood type is being sent all over. But again, she's not giving up her own dreams as well. Education is still a really important part of her life. She decides that the students of Two Rivers, they need a new school. So she goes and champions a new school to be built in Two Rivers in 1877. And then also, 1903, a new high school is built. And who's it named after? Her son, but still, Hamilton. Maybe a little bit her too. I really hope they had her in those discussions. But of course, she, again, wants education to be strong in the community. So she also helps create the Joseph Mann Library Association. So she dies in 1913 at the age of 83. And this is her monument in Pioneers Rest Cemetery. Marge Miley should be a name very well known in our community. Whether you're a transplant or a native, you've probably either heard of Marge Miley's name, come across an article, or a reference to her. Yes? Quite a few. All right. So Marge Miley is most notably known for her Milestones column, which she wrote, published for over 30 years in the Manitowoc Herald-Times Reporter. So Milestones, Miley, that's how she named her column, if you didn't know that. So Marge is actually a transplant. She is not a Manitowoc County native, but we won't hold that against her. She was born in Sheboygan in 1925, and eventually they made their way to Michigan. After living in Mishcut for a few years, they came to Manitowoc, and she's actually a graduate of Lincoln High School. And that's where she gets a little bit of her writing bug. She eventually starts working for the Manitowoc Herald-Times reporter in the newsroom, catching up on stories. She's doing this already as a high school student. She knew what she wanted to do, which is remarkable. She eventually becomes the managing editor. And when she retired in 1986, she still decided, oh, I don't want to give it all up. I'm going to still continue writing my milestones column. Hard to let go, right? So she started the milestones column in 1979, and she actually wrote it through until 2009. That is quite a stretch. So Marge Miley covered every bit of Manitowoc County history that you can imagine. If it happened, she covered it. She maybe covered it 2 or 3 times even. So when Marge Miley was getting ready to hang up her pen in 2009, she actually approached our Manitowoc County Historical Society and said, I'm not ready to let it go yet. So she gave us her blessing to transfer the milestones column over to the Historical Society. So even today, we continue to write bi-weekly columns in the Manitowoc Herald-Times Reporter newspaper as an inspiration, as an homage to Marge Miley. So if you see one of our articles, think of Marge. But of course, Marge's contributions to the community don't just end at being not only the first female editor of the HTR, she's the only female editor of the HTR, but also Girl Scouts. She left an incredible legacy. How many Girl Scouts do we have in the room? Quite a few. So Marge Miley really, for Manitowoc County, helped put Girl Scouts on the map. She made sure that it was very well publicized in a local newspaper because she had some really good access to it. She also made sure that camps were accessible to young girls that wanted them. She self-funded a lot of camps for young girls, gave their families the money that they needed to attend those programs, which was incredible. She was a business leader as well. She was credited for being on many business and women business organizations. Excuse me. She was also in the Wisconsin Business Women Top 10 in their magazine for over 10 years. So repeatedly, she is being listed and promoted. When she passes away, she actually gives her entire milestones collection to the Manitowoc County Historical Society. So this is a collection that we still have at our museum today. It is a full file cabinet, 3 drawers, full of not only every article that Marge had written, but every piece of correspondence that was returned to her. And I will tell you for a fact that bottom drawer is full of thank you letters, correspondence saying, oh, tell me more. And she responded to every single piece of mail that she received, which is incredible. I aspire to respond to my mail as well as Marge did someday. So again, Marge Miley, not only a really great person that we can help share our local history with, even all these years after her death, her newspaper articles are still being shared, still being sent out to people all over the world, essentially through our research requests. So she will forever live through her milestones column. And there's one of them right there. All right, so we're getting in a little bit of military history as well tonight. So Rhoda Ziesler, she is, I guess, someone that I would have loved to have met. When I heard about her a few years ago, she is actually the mom of one of our volunteers out at the museum, and she just seems like the grandma that you'd love to have. She really is. So I'll tell you a little bit about her story. First of all, anyone know her? Know the name? Know the name? All right. So she also kept a journal, which is very telling. Again, I encourage everyone, keep a journal. Helps tell your story. She had wrote, "Ever since I was a little girl, from the first time I studied geography, my ambition was to go to Hawaii." Sounds pretty nice too. So she wrote that first entry in a notebook, and soon after she wrote that, she actually arrived as an Army nurse in Hawaii on November 9th, 1941. So within a month, Japanese planes attacked Pearl Harbor. So her story doesn't end there, thankfully. She was born December 17th, 1916, and she had graduated from Lincoln High School in 1934. She then went to Holy Family Hospital of Nursing and graduated. She was accepted into the Army Nursing Corps, and in the 1940s, she received orders to go to Michigan, train as a nurse, and continue her education. She then, of course, finds herself in Hawaii, and she is working at the 215th General Hospital on the morning of the Japanese attack. She was actually reported to be giving a sponge bath to a soldier suffering from pneumonia when she heard the planes. For the half an hour, she and the rest of the personnel in the hospital thought it was a practice attack. Then she saw the flames and smoke and 50 planes flying so close she could see the rising sun emblem from the window. Then the casualties started coming. She was quickly made the head nurse in a 112-bed medical ward. She was supervising 6 nurses and was the assistant to the chief nurse. On December 7th, she helped triage patients. She determined who needed surgery right away, who could wait, and who was not going to survive. That was up to her. She decided to use toe tags to mark patients who had been given morphine. And one of the stories that she captures in her journal is about a patient who had been shot in the chest. And she says, "This guy was bubbling and gurgling, and the doctor said, 'Put your finger in there and plug it up like a something,' which she did. She even said he looked up at her and said, 'You have the most beautiful brown eyes I've ever seen.' And then he passed away. She brought over, covered him with a sheet. There was also another guy that had his head covered with a sheet. She pulled the sheet back and said, 'Oh my gosh, the guy doesn't have his head. There aren't any dog tags. How will someone know where his family is and who he belongs to?'" So, this is a really nice story of how do we take a local person and put them on a national level. This is an event that obviously Pearl Harbor, we read about in history books. There was a local person there. She came back here and continued to tell that story. So even when you look at the Civil War, Pearl Harbor, there's local people that were there that made an impact. And Rhoda is a perfect example of that. Frances Rankin. So Frances Rankin is the short little lady on the picture there. But she started the AFS program here in Manitowoc. Has anyone been an AFS student or had one? A few? Perfect. So we might not have a lot in this room that are part of this program, but when you look at Manitowoc County, there's actually hundreds of high school age students from all across the globe that have been a part of Frances Rankin's initiative for AFS here. In 1950, she read an article in a Milwaukee newspaper about this program, and she thought, we can bring that here to Manitowoc County. And she made it happen. In 1951, there were 3 students that came to Manitowoc under this program. She was actually elected to the Manitowoc Board of Education in 1958, and she was the first woman in 38 years to be elected to that board. She served for 9 years on 3 separate terms. Also, immediately after World War II, she organized the War Brides Club. This was an organization or a little unit that helped young women prepare for their American citizenship exams. And she was running that out of her own house and also out of the library. She was also an early supporter of the monk community here and would often provide free garden plots for them at her party at Harps Lake. She was also a senior member of the Clio Club. So again, coming around again is the Clio Club. She had joined it in 1931. She was also an active member of the Girl Scouts. So there's Frances Rankin.
Could you say what AFS is?
AFS is the American Field Service Program.
Okay.
So bringing students from other countries, incorporating them here.
Was she married to Gilbert Rankin?
Yes, she was. Yep. Gilbert was her husband. Did you know her?
I knew of her, and I knew the people that bought some land from her. Yeah. A very fascinating woman.
Yes. Ruth Richter. You probably know her husband's family, Richter Vinegar. Most people probably know the Richter home. Now, Kaminsky Law Office. To give you a little bit of a background, you can almost see, it's a little hard to see, but in the picture behind the car, you can actually see part of the Kaminsky Law Office building. But for more than a quarter of a century, Summertime, Manitowoc, and Ruth Richter was all about pie and ice cream socials. So in my mind, I can't imagine a better way to not only celebrate Manitowoc than pie, ice cream, summertime. But Ruth obviously wanted to have it with a purpose. So she became a very strong proponent for the Memorial Hospital. And her fundraisers weren't just all about pie, ice cream, enjoying the summer weather. It essentially was about raising money for the hospital. So it all started in 1953 when the Memorial Hospital wanted to hold a pie and ice cream social. There was a meeting, nobody was volunteering. Still happens today, right? So eventually, silence, there's a pause. Ruth says, I guess I'll host it. If someone has to host it, I'll host it in my backyard. She hosts it and I guess has a wonderful time because she does it for the next 25 years. It had to have been fun, right? So it became an annual tradition, eventually drawing hundreds of people each summer to her backyard, not only for the pie and ice cream social, but for people curious to get a glimpse of the pie and ice cream social as well. Her garden was apparently something to see on its own, but it became almost the go-to. You go past the Richter home, you want to take a peek at the backyard, maybe get invited in for some pie and ice cream as well. So, of course, her husband, Oscar Richter, he owned the Richter Vinegar Company. So, again, this family is very well-to-do in Manitowoc, prominent, well-known, and she takes that status that she has and uses it to raise some money for the hospital. So it didn't just stop right there at the pie and ice cream social. She actually continues to be on building committees, planning committees, and even is reported to have told the other men, she was the only female on the building committee, she was reported to have told all the men that they don't know how to build a hospital that is comfortable for the women in their lives. She also was a charter member of the hospital's board of trustees, and she served as a member of the board until 1986. So she died a year later in 87 at the age of 95. But her legacy will forever be those pie and ice cream socials that really became a summer status symbol for people to go and check out the Richter house. Lillian Chalupek. So again, focusing on education, but Lillian, and I love this picture of her here. So she was born in Francis Creek And her father was an attorney, her mom a school teacher. Her family encouraged her to get an education after she finished her own schooling, and she attended the Manitowoc County Teacher Training School, which at the time that she attended it was actually at the Heritage Center site. She had graduated and taught in Michigan. She unfortunately has a few rough years. Her sister passes away, and she leaves teaching for a little while to get her headspace back. But as soon as she launches back into teaching, she wants to rise to a higher level, not just a classroom, not just a school. She actually becomes Manitowoc County's first supervising teacher and assists the superintendent of schools to travel all throughout Manitowoc County at all of the rural school locations. She doesn't stop there. In 1920, she becomes the first woman to serve as Manitowoc County's superintendent of schools. She also started a club here in Manitowoc County called 4-H. So if you're a part of a 4-H program in Manitowoc County, you have Lillian to thank for that. She had died in 1960, but her legacy still lives on as not only the first superintendent of schools, but in the hundreds of students locally that participate in the 4-H program. Emily Richter. So same family as Ruth, but a little bit different angle. So Emily Richter really, this is a name that should be blasted all over the state of Wisconsin. But it all actually starts with a man, Charles Viabon. Did you know that Viabon was actually a person, not just a road, street? So Charles Viabon, he comes here to Manitowoc, and he becomes principal at the First Ward School here in town. Most people also know about it as the Roosevelt School. But Charles Viabon, he's got this crazy, kooky idea called kindergarten. At the time, so Charles is from Germany. It's a big thing over in Germany, and you want to teach your youngest students, have a kindergarten classroom, that early learning. He comes to Wisconsin, and of course, there's no kindergartens here. What you gonna do? He comes to Manitowoc. He wants to start a kindergarten. He's a principal. He could do it. He needs a teacher. So Emily at the time is actually teaching in Osmond, southern Manitowoc County, for those of you who need a little bit of map assistance. But she is 20 years old, a young teacher. She started teaching at 17, so a few years under her belt. And she presents at an Osmond teacher meeting. And over in the back is Charles Viabon. He just sits there, takes it all in. He approaches her at the end of the meeting and said, "Would you like a job?" She has a job. She's a teacher in Osmond. Sure. So she doesn't have any idea of what kindergarten is. That philosophy has not really made its way through the Manitowoc public schools yet. So he actually sends her over to Milwaukee and has her do some training there. So this is in about 1872. So there is already the first kindergarten that was already established in Watertown in 53. This was a private kindergarten run at a private level all the way through, started with 18 students. Emily actually gets sent to Watertown to visit with the woman who started it, learn a little bit about what they do. And here in Manitowoc at the First Ward School in the fall of 1873 is reportedly the first public kindergarten class for the entire state of Wisconsin, and arguably the first in the entire country. Public, not private, public. So again, Charles, Emily, he picked the perfect teacher to carry out this method. And there is an early picture of Emily. But of course, Emily doesn't end there. So she teaches for a few years at the kindergarten level. And then, any kindergarten teachers here? I should ask that. Michelle, bless your heart for being a kindergarten teacher. Emily does it for a few years and decides, I want to teach high school students. She goes the way other opposite end of the spectrum. And Emily goes to college, to the teacher's training school, gets her two-year degree, comes back here to the First Ward school again, to the First Ward High School, teaches high school students. So talk about going from the young littles to probably students that were taller than her. So Charles Viabon as well, I know the story is not necessarily about him, but he also goes on to be an educational leader in the state of Wisconsin and continues to credit Emily for a bunch of his success. He is very well ingrained as a professor through the UW system, and in one of his speeches actually credits Emily here as being the first kindergarten teacher in the state of Wisconsin. So he definitely respected her, and he picked the right person. So Emily passed away in 1941 at the age of 91 and is buried in Evergreen Cemetery, if you'd like to pay tribute to her. All right, so we all know in history books, or as we look up our own family history, it's Mrs. James Smith, or any husband's name, and you're a Mrs., and your name is often missing from the history books. So unfortunately, all we know about Mrs. Gideon Collins is she was married to Gideon Collins. Someday we'll find out her name, I promise. There's got to be something in the archives somewhere. But Mrs. Gideon Collins and her secret helper, which I'll tell you more about, this is a story that we tell to thousands of students each year. So if you've heard it before, I apologize, but it is one that should be told for generations to come. So Mrs. Gideon Collins, again, going back to the Civil War, Manitowoc, remember, is not a city at this time. It's the village of Manitowoc, and her husband, Gideon Collins, is the president, he's not a mayor, he's the president of the village of Manitowoc. So what does that mean? She's just kind of along for the ride, right? It's the 1860s, it's Manitowoc, she's here. But she does something pretty incredible that we can credit to her, and it's shown right here in the picture. So this is at our museum, and this is the flag of Company A that was donated to us by James Anderson in 1925. This flag right here is Mrs. Gideon Collins' legacy. Civil War breaks out, and the Manitowoc County Guards assemble at Union Park. And as they're training and getting ready to go off to Camp Randall, she wants to make sure that these guys have something to remember the community, the citizens, remember Manitowoc by. So as you can see in the flag, this was her idea. She wants to give these boys a flag to take off into battle. We have 3 colors in our flag. Here's a test. All right. What's one color? Red. All right, red. Chicago has red silk. Problem solved. Another color. Blue. Blue silk. Chicago has that too. We need one more color. White. Chicago is all out of white silk. I don't know how that happens, but it did. So Mrs. Gideon Collins, she raises the money. She gets a group of ladies to go to Chicago. They get red silk. They get blue silk. They come home empty-handed with white silk. I guess they could have made a flag with red and blue, but they had their mind set on red, white, and blue for obvious reasons. So Mrs. Gideon Collins assembles her group of ladies and said, well, a little bit of a setback. What do we do? A young woman comes up to Mrs. Gideon Collins and says, so I have this white silk. I bought it previously to make a wedding dress. She hadn't been married yet. She hadn't made her dress. She donated the white silk for the flag project under one condition. No one must ever know who she is. So Mrs. Gideon Collins, of course, says, "Give me the silk. I won't tell a single soul." And to this day, we have no idea who the young woman was who donated the white silk for the flag. So Mrs. Gideon Collins and her ladies that get to work, they put this flag together and they present it to the Manitowoc County Guards. So you can see on the flag, I don't know if you can all see that, the writing. So it says the Manitowoc County, Wisconsin Volunteers. Here at the museum, we call this flag the flag of Company A. So as the men assemble at Union Park, they're gifted this flag here, and they make Mrs. Gideon Collins a promise. First of all, they will carry this flag with them into battle. Small setback, you actually cannot take a community flag like this into battle. It's kind of illegal. They learn this at Camp Randall, and they start thinking, okay, we made a promise. Mrs. Gideon Collins is going to be really mad at us. So they hide it in their bag. Long story short, because I want to focus on her, the flag gets captured by the Confederates. It's found again at an exposition and brought back here. But Mrs. Gideon Collins keeps her secret. Like I said, to this day, no one knows who the woman was who donated the white silk. And no one knows Mrs. Gideon Collins' true name or even her story, what happened to her. So if anyone out there is really good at sleuthing and detective skills in Manitowoc in like the 1860s.
I wonder if there's anything in the journal about it. There's a little bit of mention about anything in making a flag, but I don't think the details he's looking for. I'll look.
Yeah, we have not found an actual first name of her or what happened after they left Manitowoc. So it's a mystery, but Mrs. Gideon Collins will forever be associated with that flag of Company A. Like I said, it's a story that we tell thousands of students, so many visitors to our museum. And if it wasn't for her effort to create this, first of all, and present it to the boys as they were leaving Manitowoc, we wouldn't have this in our collection. So it is not only a testament to those boys that took the flag into battle, and it eventually made its way back to Manitowoc, but she made this possible. And the secret white silk giver as well. She should get some credit too. But Mrs. Gideon Collins and the flag. All right, so Ruth West is a name that we've heard so many times. Her legacy is forever ingrained in Manitowoc and in a lot of organizations like our Manitowoc County Historical Society. So this is one of my most favorite pictures of Ruth West and her gardener. I love how she's just pointing out, oh my goodness, fix that. Right? That's what I imagine her saying. So Ruth was born in a Quaker community in New York in 1898, and she was the oldest of 5 daughters. She actually attended a 2-year county normal school and taught in her first year, first grade at a rural school there. She married Morgan St. John, who was a tax attorney, and he had passed away, and Ruth rented a former office area at Cornell University, and there she met John West. So the story eventually goes, they come back here to Manitowoc, obviously where the Wests have Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company, and Ruth quickly goes to work making Manitowoc her home. She ingrains herself not only in local literature, in local efforts, but they take this piece of land that nobody wanted anything to do with. It was bad. We didn't want it. It wasn't developed. So right off of Memorial Drive, I'm sure you all know where the property is, she decides, no, that's what I want. And she starts working towards it. So you've got cold, windy lake right off Lake Michigan. Of course, there's not really much for horticulture right there as well, but she really wanted to see it prosper. So it was spaded, the entire acre, hand by hand, and Ruth was right behind the gardener on her hands and knees, wearing, and I quote, an old mink coat. I would love to have a picture of that right there. She shook out the roots of the quackgrass and the thistles, and it took her 9 years to make this a nice piece of land. Of course, one of the pieces that we know what Ruth West is most known for is her tulip teas. So she started this in 1936, her annual tulip teas, and they attracted thousands of visitors each spring. And one of the other things that we really know about her and credit her for is the RAR Civic Center in Manitowoc. So she became involved with that in 1970. And for the next 20 plus years, she was its chief benefactor and the patron. So the RAR West Art Museum today. But really, gardening is a main focus for her, and it continues. So not only do we see her at a local level being involved with gardening the west of the lake, the tulip teas, but she is involved at a statewide level and a little bit at a national lens as well. She's giving garden talks to Girl Scouts. She is doing garden programs on WMT radio, which they're still talking about gardening on the radio today in public programs. She was the first. It's so neat. One of her programs was what is the best way to prepare the soil for a garden. And in this program, I wish we had a copy of it, but she recaps moment by moment of her on her hands and knees prepping the land. Again, that'd be great to have a picture, right? Marge, does the picture exist?
Probably not.
Maybe. So, of course, the tulip tea is held the first Sunday of June. There's a few instances where it was not. There was 3 garden events in 1945, in 1950, and 1961, where it was postponed because of the weather. In 1958, it was moved up a week because of winds and a storm, and 2 teas were canceled, one by storm damage in 1943 and another in 1964 by warm weather, which caused the tulips to bloom too early. And also, during World War II, again, there's thousands of workers at Manitowoc Shipbuilding. They're building the submarines, and she decides the tulip tea must continue. She owes it to her community. So this particular tea is captured actually in the keel block, and the employees reportedly in there are like, tulip tea? Okay, sure. Their wives, on the other hand, I'm sure were very excited. Ruth West also served on the Manitowoc Girl Scout Council, which at this time had 610 girls enrolled in the organization. She took it on her mission to make sure that the girls knew that gardening wasn't just for making your vegetables and making your food to eat. It can also be pretty and glorifying and something to surround yourself for your own mental health. She continued to be gardening at a statewide level, appearing at conferences, being in different publications, and taking her voice all throughout the United States. She was in Tulsa, Arizona, and even in Connecticut, doing different programs on how she had transformed her land into the West of the Lake Gardens. She was also a charter member of the Manitowoc Garden Study Club, and of course, the Happiness Garden Club. Love to hear about that. But of course, gardening, visual arts, we remember her for that, but it's her philanthropy efforts that are still continuing her legacy today. I know no organization in Manitowoc County would even be a glimmer of hope or a possibility without the dedication of Ruth West and John West. But when we look at Ruth West's legacy, of course, we have the home that they contributed to that is still there and a symbol for our community. We have her community involvement. But of course, it's nighttime, so we can't really go outside and see this. But beautiful mural to Ruth West, and her status in our community. Yes, her gardens are beautiful. She did great work, not only at a statewide level, maybe even national level. But again, her legacy, her continued story of Manitowoc County is one of philanthropy, community spirit, and Manitowoc was never her hometown by birth, but she truly made us her home, and we all owe her quite a bit here for our community.
Can you credit the artists, please? Aaron Labonte,
David Carpenter,
and Rebecca Jab.
Yes,
From
thank
Lake
you.
Charlottesville.
So this piece I encourage you to check out when it's daylight. But when Ruth West died in 1990, Manitowoc County truly lost a pioneer for our community. So she may not be a historic housewife by any means, but when we look at women who have truly made a difference in our community, Ruth West is an example that we can all try a little bit to get somewhere near what she all continues to accomplish for our community. So again, we all also can take a little bit of Ruth West, of Emily Richter, of Lillian Chalupek with us as we continue our work in the community. Obviously, Manitowoc County was not created in a day, a year, or even a decade or a century. But it's up to us as women in the community and even the men supporting us to be able to make our own names and make our own waves. This is one of my favorite quotes. If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. And I challenge you all to live that quote every single day. So thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Any questions?
What about the Clio Club?
Yeah, the Clio Club. Oh my gosh, we could have actually a whole presentation on that.
Does it
Which,
still exist? Does it stand for something?
I don't know if it
Do they have a
stands
secret place?
for anything. I don't think there's a secret handshake. I believe it is dormantly existing. They're not highly out there anymore. I don't believe. I don't know if anyone knows differently. But it's just within like the last decade, I think that it's almost gone to sleep a little bit. But actually, I might do a program on that. That's a very good idea. Yes. I empower you all to go out in the community and make a difference.
I want to thank you guys again for coming out to hear Amy talk and learn so much about the cool women of Manitowoc. If you enjoyed this program and want to see more like it, please consider supporting both the Wisconsin Maritime Museum and the Manitowoc County Historical Society. Next month, we have a really cool talk coming up as well. It is Black Women or Black Girls Dive Foundation, which is a foundation that is working to empower young Black women through scuba diving and teaching them how to do that. And they get to go out and help conserve like sharks, like study sharks and like oysters and all of this super cool stuff. And so we're going to have the president of their foundation as well as a couple of their alumni here at the museum. So that will be super cool. And yeah, I encourage you guys to grab one of our schedules of things coming up. If you enjoy this program, if you want to see more like it, support can come in different ways. It can become as donating, becoming a member, coming to programs, and telling all of your family and friends about the fun time you had here at the museum. So yeah, thank you so much.